Hello class, and welcome to word problems. They're everyone's favorite. And today the learning target is I can use algebra to interpret and solve a word problem. So in word problems, it's kind of hard to prepare for them because they all start so differently. And we have to be good at changing that English into some math. And when you're dealing with algebra, it's there's a lot of process to it that we can hopefully make this more of a simple process. So let's get an example of one you might see. I'm going to bring it right up here. It is this one. It comes with a picture and everything. So it says a store has Y shirts. So we don't know how many shirts they have. That's the mystery here. There we go. And it says it sold most of them, so again, that's not a specific number, most of them for $16 each. We'll probably need to know that. And the last dozen, so sometimes I like to throw something in there that's a word, it's a number, so we know that means 12. So the last 12 were sold on sale for 14 each. Alright, so most of them for 16, but 12 of them were 14 each. If it sold all the shirts for $616, so that's what it sold all of them for, and the number of shirts sold. Alright, so let's first think about the thing we're trying to find. And actually, usually they don't give you the variable for it right off the bat, but this time they do. So we're going to say let y equal. Now this is called a let statement. So the first thing you're going to need to do is write a let statement. And the let statement, M has one too many loops. The let statement tells the audience, meaning anyone who's reading your problem, and that includes you, what your variable represents. So it's important that we get this right. Let y equal, and they tell us a store has Y shirts. So number of shirts, we're going to say sold because it says later that they sold all of them. So let y equal number of shirts sold, and I have to remember as I'm using that y that's what it means. It means all of the shirts, not just the part that I'm thinking of at that moment. Okay, so this first thing says sold most of them for 16 and the last dozen for 14 each. So I'm thinking that last 14 for a dozen is going to be easy to figure out because I can actually figure out how much that is, 14 times 12. So 14 times 12, maybe that'll be a part of my equation. That's just a number. I also know that all of this on the left that I'm going to sum up, I'm going to figure out how much the $16 shirts add up to. I'm going to figure out how much the $14 shirts add up to, and that all will equal 616. So I can kind of partially make my equation. What I'm missing is the number of shirts sold for $16. So I know that there were 12 shirts sold for $14, and if you want to at first, you want to put little money symbol in there, but generally you don't use that in your equation at all. But just to keep things organized now, we'll put that in there. It'll get added to the shirts that sold for $16 each. So I'm going to put a 16 here. I'm going to put a little teeny money symbol there. It's going to be multiplied by something, and that something is going to have to do with y. We haven't even used it yet. But it can't just be y, because they weren't all sold for $16, and that's what y represents. Y represents all of the shirts sold. So that comes back to that dozen. It says the last dozen were sold at a different price. So if I take my y, which is all of them, and I take away the dozen that were already sold that I know about, that's the other non-dozen shirts. So I have my equation. This is not how the equation will be set up next time because it'll be a different word problem and a different way of thinking. So a lot of it you just have to use some common sense, you have to use some structure. And that begins with a let statement that identifies what you're looking for. And then this is the toughest part right here. This is the part where you have to come up with an equation that says the story that they gave you. Alright, so from here on out, it's algebra. So I'm going to distribute the 16. So this is 16y. And I did these calculations once already, but I've already forgotten them. So let me do this again. 16 times 12 is 192. Plus, and then this is just, it's not really distributing, it's just multiplying these two. You get 14 times 12. Again, I forgot that one. I think it's 168. Yes, 168 equals 616. Alright, now I have two constants on the left here. So these two things can be combined. So I get 16y. The negative one's bigger, so I know it's going to stay negative. But I'm going to check this. I get 24. So negative 24 when you combine those. Again, now I have two constants, but they're on opposite sides of the equation. So I want to do the opposite operation. Plus 24 on both sides. I get 16y is equal to, this is 640. Just make sure. Yep, 640. Divide both sides by 16. And we're hoping for a whole number here because we don't want, I don't think they sold half a shirt. And I think that's 40. I'm going to double check. I don't want to be wrong in the video. I've been wrong in videos before. They attack me. Alright, so y equals 40. This is not the end of a word problem. You can't leave it like this. You've done most of the work, but you need to interpret what this means. So in a sentence, we're going to say our answer. So I always tell the kids, if you have a word problem, you should have a word answer. So we say, the store had 40 shirts. It doesn't say at the end. We'll just say to begin with. When this lovely story started, it had 40 shirts, and when it ended, it had none. Now, a check is a little tricky with a word problem because you came up with the equation. So if you check the equation you came up with, you're only going to check the work that came after that. It does not check to see if you actually came up with the right equation. So I kind of like to use common sense. So I come up here and I say, alright, I want to see if I'm right with this 40. It says, so I know that a dozen were sold for 14 each. We'll call this a kinda check. It's not an official check, but sometimes it's more useful than doing an official check because you're only checking the work of something created. So we're going to go back to the word problem itself, and we're going to say, alright, a dozen for 14 each. For 14 each, oops. And then 16 each. And then this is the number we never actually came up with. It was represented right here with y minus 12. And now that I know that y is supposed to be 40, I could say, okay, the other chunk is 40 minus 12, which is 28. So I know that 12 shirts were sold for $14, 28 shirts were sold for $16, and I'm hoping that these two numbers will add up to the grand total of $616. I already did this problem once. This is 168. And of course I've forgotten this one again. Let me get my calculator back out. 28 times 16 is 448. And then I'm going to add these together, and I get 616. So I call it a kinda check because I'm using more common sense than a procedure. but it did work out. If I went through the problem again using what I know for an answer, it did work out, and it still makes sense. See my controls here. There we go. All right, just to let's do a little breakdown of what we did here. I'm going to get rid of all that work. I'm going to get rid of the original problem, and I have to make a new layer because I can't and stuff. Okay. Yeah, I'm using Photoshop here. It's not what I use all the time. I use it when I'm home. So when I do a word problem, first thing I do is let statement. So I always do a let statement. Establishes what I'm trying to find. Don't need that. Then the thing I do is I write the equation. That's the part that's going to take you a little while. So you write out the equation. That is, probably 75% of the difficulty in a word problem is taking that English and transferring it into a mathematical statement. Then, I'm going to solve. That's hopefully much easier to do by now. You're going to write a sentence answer. And then finally, if you can, if possible, do I'm going to call it right now, I haven't called it that before, a kinda check. If you can. Sometimes it's a little tougher, but often you can do a little check that makes a lot of sense in your head. And don't be afraid to write it out to prove that you did it. Alright, I just want to give you a quick help for what we're going to do in class based on these notes. So your 2 problems is it. 2 word problems. And the first one has to do with money. And a lot of times people forget that they know more about money than a problem tells them. So it'll say something like, David has 5 quarters in his pocket. And 3 dimes in his pocket, something like that. And we know that 5 quarters is 5 times 25 cents. And we know that 6 dimes is 6 times 10 cents. That seems obvious to us now. If someone just said I have 5 quarters and 6 dimes, you could pretty quickly see how much money that person had. But this part is not obvious in other examples. And the one that you have in class, it's not obvious that you have to assign a value to quarters and dimes, but you do. So I just wanted to give that tip. I'm not going to tell you the whole problem. We'll figure that out in class together. Alright, good luck. Hopefully one problem satisfied your need of word problems. And the 2 problems we do in class will be even more fun, I promise. Good night.